Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I am so happy today to get to chat again with my friend, Thea James. Thea shared her personal experience with concussion back on episode 52, so go check that out. She has such a beautiful spirit about her that you can just feel in listening to her story. And she shares some practical things that helped her in her recovery that I think will be really beneficial for everyone. So check that one out. And you will also enjoy hearing Thea's accent again in episode 66, where she interviewed me about my journey and how I came to be doing what I'm doing in the concussion space. So today I'm very, very happy to have her join me again. I had an idea that I wanted to explore the topic of friendships post-concussion, and I thought that Thea would be a great person to have that conversation with. She's so friendly and loves people and just makes genuine, deep connections with people. And so I thought getting her perspective on friendship relationships would be very, very helpful. So thank you so much for coming back on again, Thea. It's so fun to have you back.
Thank you for having me. And also thank you so much for working with the New Zealand time zone, because it's a tricky one and I appreciate it. So it's a joy to be here.
I appreciate it too. Yes, it's fun. It's always fun coordinating long distance time zone changes. So I'm grateful that we found a time to work. And also for those listening, this will be edited, so hopefully you won't notice, but we may have some glitches in our conversation here. So bear with us if there's any kind of weirdness going on with the audio. So anyway, just want to throw that out there. But why don't we just have you do a quick introduction of yourself for our listeners who may not have had the pleasure of listening to the other episodes yet. Can you just tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So kia ora, everyone. I'm from New Zealand, and kia ora is how we say hello over here at the bottom of the world. My connection to brain injury is through concussion myself. So I had a concussion at 2 and 8 years old. And then I've had 5 in adulthood, and 4 of those were from the age of 23 years old to 25-year-old. All sort of adrenaline related. We had like horse riding, go-karting, dancing, skydiving for the adulthood ones. And the horse riding one and the skydiving one really sat me back in terms of needing a lot of rehabilitation. And I ended up deciding to step back from my career. I worked in agriculture and soil science with farmers and cows and grass, which I just loved. But repercussions from the concussions, particularly with each subsequent one of those 4 in that short time frame, just made it really challenging to do that role. And so I made the decision to step back from that, which I think was the right decision for me. But also throughout the journey, I became really nerdy about brains and brain injury. And I've always loved people, which is what I loved about my role in agriculture. And so I decided to do a master's in speech and language pathology, which I've just finished. And that's very much driven by that passion for brain injury. And so whilst it started as sort of personal interest, the more I learn and the more I experience the amazing community that we have in the brain injury space, the more passionate I am about getting in there and doing what we would call mahi, which is work in that space. And then I also have my dear father. He had a stroke in 2019. And so we've sort of gone through our brain injury road together, which has been quite special. So I have the connection in terms of being a person with brain injury, but then also having a really loved family member navigate that path as well.
Wow, I don't know if I knew that about your dad. I'm sorry that he's had that experience as well, but that is really beautiful that you guys are, doing that together. That's really, really sweet, actually. But thank you for that summary there. And so congratulations on graduating. That is huge. Like, she's put so much work and effort into this, and it's not been an easy road. So I am so proud of you. So awesome. So why don't you, as a little bit more background of why I want to talk about this, we know that concussions impact pretty much every part of a person's life, including their relationships. And the relationships that are most often focused on in regards to concussions are the relationships with the caregivers and the family members specifically, which makes sense. But all relationships are impacted, and we don't often talk about navigating friendships post-injury. So that is what we're here to do today. And I recognize that people have different approaches to really to friendship in general. Some people love to make friends with every single person that they meet, and other people are perfectly happy to have one or two close friends and aren't interested in putting time or energy into making new ones. So whatever your, friendship desires are, that's totally fine. People come into it having their own interests, but those relationships with people that, aren't family members, but we feel close to matter, and they can be impacted by this injury as well. So I was hoping you could just let us know, kind of start off with a broad general level, like, what kind are you? Do you want to make friends with everybody, or do you just have one or two and you're good to go? Like, what was your experience with friendship like prior to concussion? And then did that change afterwards? And if so, how?
Yeah, basically, I'm just like a golden retriever. I think that's a great summary. I love people. I find people really fascinating, really inspiring. And also I love helping or contributing. That's something that brings me a lot of joy and meaning. And so before my concussions, I had a full-time job in agriculture, but I would also do babysitting and house sitting, and worked for a TV company in spare time, and volunteered with a disaster response team. And those are all avenues that I built friendships that I really valued, kind of through doing and contributing. And then also investing in long-term friendships. All my weekends were quite full. I'd say to my friends, if you want to see me, you need to book me out 3 months in advance. And that wasn't actually a joke. I would be booked out that far ahead, because I'd really value that quality time with people, and particularly long-term people in my life. I'm very lucky to have been just wrapped up in so many families, because I'm originally from England. I have my mum, dad, and brother in this hemisphere, but that's kind of it, particularly in New Zealand. So I've always really valued and treasured not just my friends, but also their family around them and their community. But part of the challenge with that is you build a network of people that you love so much, but there's like a bit too many to catch up with properly. And so that's where I would book people out so far in advance. And that's kind of how I ran before my brain injuries. And it just really fueled me. I would drive an hour and a half to catch up with you for dinner, and then I drive an hour and a half back to make sure I'm back and there for work the next day. And that was really beautiful. But then after brain injury, the capacity just wasn't there to do the same. So it's definitely been an evolution for how I show up and how I feel like I'm contributing in relationships. Do you want me to dive into that now, or do you have any questions about pre-concussions as an adult for friendships?
No, I just have to tell you though that this is why we are friends. I like everything you're saying. I'm like, yes. That is exactly how I operate. And my husband is the kind that is like good with one or two friends, and he's set. And that's been a challenge sometimes in our relationship. It's just kind of funny how just different people approach things differently. But I can totally relate to how you relate to people. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So I'm glad. Nice to feel seen and heard here.
Totally.
But I do want to know, in regards to friendships that you had. Well, if you had like friendships that you had prior to your injury, if those changed at all. Some people talk about finding out who their quote unquote real friends are after an injury like this, which I think to some degree, like it makes sense. But also I feel like that might be coming from a place of hurt when people say that, because they feel like people have abandoned them. And I don't know I think the people who quote unquote abandoned them may or may not see it that way themselves. Like there's a lot of awkwardness. Anyway, relationships can be really complicated. So I would just love to hear your experience just kind of with that transition of like prior friends that you had prior to post as well.
Yeah. And it's such a hard one. I think that acknowledgement of a friendship looks so unique for each person, even minus a brain injury, but then also the nuance of brain injury and maybe what was impacted. So mobility or cognition, or it can impact it so uniquely for everyone. And so I think that can also impact maybe how dependent one needs to be. And so I guess I was quite blessed in the sense that whilst it's been a struggle post-concussion, for the most part, I've been able to go and get my own food or, able to take myself to my medical appointments. And so I guess I have the luxury in that sense that I'm also fiercely independent to a fault, but I haven't necessarily had to completely rely on someone else to meet my basic needs of like food and water and bits and pieces like that. But I also count myself extremely lucky for the people that are around me. And so I haven't particularly experienced that, particularly in the first few years. Like the people that I really held close and treasured and invest my time in just showed up quite beautifully. And at the time of my the one at 25, which was the worst concussion, my flat that I lived in, do you call them flats in America? You live with a group of people? Housemates?
Apartments.
Yeah. It's a house.
Roommates.
Yeah, roommates. So like in a house.
Okay, yeah.
We call them flats regardless of what the building looks like. I don't know why. But I was really lucky. So at the time I was in a house with 5 of us and the most beautiful people, all completely different in character, just like a kind of licorice all sorts, but really lovely. And I remember getting in my car to go to a medical appointment and one of the boys said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to the doctor." He said, "No, you're not." So I think I am. And I'm really grateful that he was strong enough to say, "No, we're not comfortable with you driving." So even though medically I hadn't been told that I couldn't drive, he was firm enough but loving enough to say no. And my response was, "Well, tell me how I'm going to get to my appointments." And then he said, "We will organize it. You tell us what we need, and between the 4 of us, we will get you where you need to go." And I think that was such a gift for me because on reflection, I 100% should not have been driving in that window. So really grateful for that, for safety of myself and others. But I think as well, I do struggle to ask for help. So I was just really blessed that the people I was living with at the time actually took ownership for that without me necessarily having to ask. And I think that was a gift. And I had other friends that would turn up with, goodie bags of puzzles and chocolate and not things that I'd asked for at all. And I would say, "I'm so sorry, I can't spend time with you." I know it's tiring. Here, I just want you to have this bag and I wanted to give you a hug. And I'm just very grateful that those are the sort of people that I was wrapped around. And I think a lot of that maybe is luck. And it really made a big difference for me. And so in terms of that, I'd had people show up, but I think what I really struggled with was like my volunteer role, for example, in disaster response. That's where I would socialize with like 30, 40 people every week. But they weren't close friends. So they weren't people that are going to come to my house and drop off goodie bags. But I really enjoyed their friendship and the connection and the laughs that we'd have and the information that we would share. And losing those kind of relationships, that was so hard. And because as well, a lot of my sense of self-worth was around contribution. I love contributing to my community. So it was kind of like a double whammy. And I think building new friendships, that's changed a lot as well, because it's really shaped how I would have shown up in those spaces versus how I can show up now. So that's been kind of an interesting one to just navigate.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on the new relationships in a minute here, but that's a really interesting point that I hadn't even considered, just the more acquaintance kind of friendships, because there are like circles, right? Like we have our inner circle of really close friends, and then we have like it just kind of goes outwards, like the degree to which you know someone or like how frequently you see them or whatever, but you still feel like a connection with them. And so it makes sense that those kind of further out ones would of necessity be kind of cut off, at least temporarily here while you're in that process of healing. And so, yeah, how did you handle that? emotionally?
Well, I guess initially it's just focusing on what you can. I mean, there's only so much capacity. And a lot of those, I say periphery friendships, but I want to be really clear that I love all these people so much. But periphery friendships is in they haven't necessarily been friends for 10 years and I haven't gone to their wedding. You know what I mean? But if I saw them on the street, I'd be so excited. And we might go and get a coffee or something every now and then. But to be honest, it was really just having to release that need that I felt to show up in the same way because I didn't have capacity. So I guess going through the grief process of that. And there are so many people that fall in that category for me that it wasn't really achievable to message every single person. But I also didn't have the awareness and I think the acceptance myself to even be able to articulate, this is how much I'm struggling. I'm sorry I can't show up, because I didn't want to admit that at all. And that's grown. I've grown with more comfortability to articulate where I'm at and when, but there was a lot going on there, you know, like losing my career, dealing with all these physical symptoms, navigating health symptoms. So I think it just kind of drifted, to be honest. And I just had to trust that the connection that I have there, that those people know that I care about them. And if I ever see them on the street, just trust that they know I genuinely would be so happy to see them. And that's kind of where it was left.
Yeah, well, that makes so much sense. And it kind of, there's so much that to grieve over when a situation like this happens. Like it probably just gets bundled in with all the grief of like all the loss. Like this is one of those things that is part of that. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think especially with those periphery ones, friendships, that those are the ones that you might drift apart and might not see each other. And if you happen to run into each other a year or two later, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. What happened? Right? Like, how have you been? So it's kind of like it makes sense that like, that's kind of a natural way to approach those kinds of friendships anyway. So I think, anyway, I appreciate you bringing that piece up. I want to chat for a second about, well, let's go ahead. Let's jump into the new friendships. Let's talk about that now. And there's other things. We'll bring in lots of stuff. But what is that experience like in developing new friendships after your concussion? I'll let you kind of go broad, and we can ask specific questions as we keep going. So
yeah, this is a fun chat, by the way.
Anything that's coming.
So for some context, when I decided to go to study, that meant I had to move. New Zealand, we have two main islands. They're very originally named. We have North Island and South Island. I lived on North Island and I had to move to South Island to do this course that I wanted to do. So it was also an interesting piece because my support network is on a completely different island. And so that was a piece to navigate. But it is also quite cool in the sense that if I'm looking back on this journey, I can quite pragmatically, I don't know if measure is the right word, but I can look at how I've built this community around me with the post-brain injury abilities, because most of my connections I have here were made in that space. But I think for me, in terms of like what builds friendship, so first of all, someone's energy straight off the bat. Normally within the first 5 seconds, I'm like, oh, this is like you, for example. I'm like, love this human, always have time, incredible. I can it happens quite quick for me, that particularly if I really resonate with them. So that's cool. But I also think friendship, like genuine friendship, actually evolves through multiple touch points rather than one or two really extravagant experiences. And I also think being able to support people through hard times, so not just being there in the good times. And that's where I found it challenging after brain injury, because there's not as much capacity. And so where I would normally like to show up, I don't know, if someone said, oh gosh, my mother's poorly, I've got to go up north, but I don't know what to do with my dog. I would normally go, oh, I would love to help. Don't worry, I'll be there. That's just something that brings me joy. And I don't have the luxury to be able to jump in that same fashion all the time or with as much consistency. So it has looked different. Having said that, I have built some really beautiful friendships here, but they look a lot more diverse than I think my core friendships on the North Island look like. And so my friendships on the North Island were very much people my age and stage in life for those core ones. So I've either been through school with them or university with them. And those are the people that I'd really connect with. But what I found interesting here is I have people my own age that I'm really treasure, but I've also made great friends with some people in their 60s and 70s. And I mean, literally this morning I was walking someone's dog for them, and she's in her 70s and she's gorgeous. And I bumped into someone else who happened to know the dog I was walking. And then we walked for the rest of the hour and we traded numbers. And this lady was also in her 70s. And it was really gorgeous. That's I'm a bit of a Labrador or golden retriever like that. But I think something that I've connected to more so with the age group is the people my age, typically at the moment, I find, fair enough, they're in that chase, buying the house, doing the mortgage, becoming a manager, climbing the corporate ladder. And the further I go through my brain injury road, the more that's not where I'm at the moment. But I do have the gift of time and slow and enjoying smaller pieces. And the sort of 60 to 70-year-olds kind of are transitioning into retirement. And so it actually pairs really beautifully. And that's how I've built some of these friendships, is older people on my street that I bump into or drop them some homemade produce, and then they drop me some pickles on my door, and lots of just small touch points along the way. So I think that's been one way that I've formed friendships that I don't think I would have made the time. When I lived in the North Island, we had this beautiful older lady next door. She would come and cut up roses for us every year. And I honestly couldn't have told you how many children she had or what her interests were. I knew her name and that was like it. So I think that's been a beautiful piece, is I think I take the time a lot more to get to know the person regardless of what age or stage, rather than just looking for someone at my age. But then I've also built friendships through study, because there's small touch points. So when I look at my good friendships, it's either people in my neighborhood that I've seen on a regular basis through walking on the street and then eventually built this friendship, or people at university that I've had high touch points with, or people that I've known since I was a teenager that have happened to move down and are already in that core circle. And other than that, there's much more periphery. And a lot of these periphery friends are people that I think are so cool. Like, I would love to build more of that core friendship with them, but I haven't had the capacity to be able to show up to things. And so that's not necessarily losing friendships, but I see these friendships that could have been really, really special. But often if it's coming to parties or 3-night camping trips or things like that aren't as accessible for me, I find myself saying, thank you so much for the invite. I won't be able to be there. And whilst I understand, it does, I think, limit that ability to build those friendships, because that's often, I think, where the memories kind of start and form.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. And can I just say, I love you. I love your stories. I love your perspective. I'm so grateful for you sharing all of this. And it's brought up, made me think of so many things. It just, I love that you're, one of the things that you were at the beginning of talking about this was the things that bring people close together is, serving helping each other in times of need, and how, rather than being and I'm having these times of need and people don't know about it because I can't tell them about it, you're not thinking about yourself. You're oh, I wish I could help people more. So I love that. But I think you're absolutely right. Those ways of connecting through service can be so powerful. So I love that perspective. And I think that's just maybe good for, just as a general rule for all people. If you're looking for friends, look for people, how you can serve the people around you. I just think that's a good principle in general. But I also love that you're an old soul. You're so young and you're connecting with these people. And that perspective of understanding their, you're in a stage of life, your life right now looks a little bit more the pace of it and the things that you're doing match more with some of your more elderly neighbors, which I think is so sweet. Yeah. And I'm sure they absolutely adore you. And it reminds me, I know you love Taiwan, and going there, I could just picture you going and doing Tai Chi in the park with the old elderly people and just totally loving that. I think you've mentioned doing that. Yeah. And so that it tracks. It totally tracks. Yeah. And I can really, I know it's not the same, but it's general principles idea of seeing so many people that you're oh, we would be really good friends if we could connect. My husband and I lived in China many moons ago when we had only 2 little ones. And I remember it just hit me so much how the people that I
I was like, we went to church, and so that was kind of one of our social networks there. I was like, okay, I would love to, there was one person in particular, I was like, oh my gosh, we would be best friends. Like my husband called her my PBFF, my potential best friend forever. And I was like, yes, we will be best friends. And then like, she lives so far away, like we only had a couple connection points and like, it was so hard. And I'm like, all right, we'll be like neighbors in heaven and we'll hang out then. But like, there's throughout life too, like even at home, it feels like there are, like here back in the States, that experience has happened a lot where I'm like, oh my gosh, I would connect so well with that person if only we had more time or like more ability, more capacity to hang out together. So I think it's okay. Like that's it turns out the way it needs to, and it's fine. And we will be able to make close relationships with people as it comes. But I think I can relate a little bit to that, like not being able to be best friends with everybody that you want to be best friends with. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And like one person to mind here, beautiful soul. I met her through the disaster team, which I tried to do for a year or two. And then in the end, I let it go because I just couldn't contribute in the way that you need to in that role. You know, I need to be able to, you call me up at 3 a.m., there's a flood, our team drives and we're there and we'll help evacuate people and feed them through the night, you know, and I love doing that, but it's not sustainable for me at the moment. I also had a few back injuries along the way in the last few years, so it's added another element of disability, I guess, so an injury. But this beautiful human, she's so cool, and they had like a van that is fully self-contained, you could go camping in, and I mentioned, I've always wanted to do that, and she said, oh, just take it for 2 weeks. Are you sure? I mean, she would give you the clothes off her back. Such a lovely person, really outdoorsy, and that's someone that I know that if I called her, she'd be there in a moment, but it's a friendship that I would have loved to invest so much more into. And that's just a reality of it, really. I actually put something aside for her the other day that I'm getting rid of and I think she'll like. So I'll drop her a message and say, you know, I thought of you, and if you'd like this, I'd love to drop it off. So I just sort of try and, I guess, not focus on what could have been, but just appreciate what is. But yeah, I guess that there is definitely an element of grief that can come with that, or as well, it's harder for me in terms of group settings at the moment. So one-on-one catch-ups are more sustainable. And yeah, I guess it just kind of changes the pictures of things a little bit. But I have also made some really cool friendships because it's just like, look, this is where I'm at. And I love the fact I've always been an old soul, as you commented, but I would like try to be cool and try to keep up. And the gift of brain injury is I can't. And so I'm so much more comfortable being like, love that for you. Yes, go for gold. Sounds like my worst nightmare. Shall we catch up for a walk or a coffee? Like, I'm much more comfortable just embracing that that's actually not my thing, even if it wasn't my thing before brain injury, but I just would have pretended to be excited. Yeah, so that's quite a nice release. But another example is I met someone, ironically, in a waiting room. We were waiting for our respective brain injury appointments, and we're both really talkative, and we got talking, and now we catch up every 6 months. He does half in America, half in New Zealand. So he stays with me when he arrives and he stays with me when he leaves. We don't catch up any other time. I don't see him the 6 months he's here. And that suits me perfectly in terms of capacity, and it suits him in terms of capacity. And then we just sit on the couch and have a catch up about life. We'll go for a walk and see you later. See you in 6 months. And so there's been some really successful friendships in and amongst that don't look what I would have probably conventionally thought of as a friendship. And so that has been quite special. And I think as well, deepening the vulnerability of friends pre-brain injury. But there is a bit of grief, I guess, around people that didn't know me before, because the people that knew me before, when they see me resting, I can see in their eyes that they know that's not what I'd like to be doing. And while sometimes that's really hard to see, I like that they kind of remember my spirit. And so with people that I meet after brain injury that only know me as someone that's maybe pacing or saying, oh yeah, if you could give me a couple of days notice so I can plan capacity. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is, but I like that people know both sides of me for the friendships that I have before and after. I do really value that.
Yeah, that is so interesting. That's so interesting. And that reminds me, I was talking to someone the other day who talked about her old self and her new self. Like it feels like a different person. And so that's an interesting point you bring up of like people who knew you before and people who met you after. And I could see it there being pros and cons to both ways, right? Like on the one side, like if the people who knew you before, it's nice that they knew you before. Like I can see that would be comforting that they know, like, I don't even want to say the real you because that doesn't feel right either. I don't know. You can correct me here, but like that they knew you before. And then I could see it being maybe to some degree a bit of a relief that like they're not the new people who met you afterwards they don't have any preconceived idea of what like to expect, And so maybe it's freeing in some ways. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Am I totally off?
I also don't know the right language. But I think, like for me at least, there's things I find really comforting. I think because I feel like I don't have to explain, like, I'm really sorry, I can't show up as much. I wish I could, because I know that they know. I see it in their eyes that they know that I'm kind of pissed off that I can't fully show up. And I appreciate that. As an example, one of my best friend's little sisters got married the other month. Like I said, I have many families where I'm very grateful to kind of be in the fold, and I know the grandparents and the cousins, and it's awesome. And so we're at this wedding, but most of the weekend for me was truly spent in the fetal position on a bed with all the pillows I could find in the house on top of my head because it was so noisy.
Oh.
And then I would kind of come out for a quiet meal, but everyone would know not to talk to me because I've had my earplugs in because I'm trying to save energy for the wedding. And then after they got married, then I went back to my fetal position. And then luckily the wedding was on the farm, so I could pop out for the speeches and then go back. And that was the wedding for me. But all day for like 3 days, there were people. It was really such a testament to the community this family has. There were like 20, 30 people in and out doing dishes and preparing. They did everything DIY. And I valued that when I came out to try and do dishes, they would say, whether it was a cousin, a daughter, a grandfather, an uncle, they would go, Thea, what are you doing? Like, I'm just going to help for 15 minutes. No, you're not. You can sit. And they didn't mean it as you're not capable, but it was because I knew that they knew how much energy all the clanging of the dishes is for me. Mm-hmm. And therefore that would take away from the wedding. And so that's what I value about people that knew me before, because they know that I would have been the first one in there and I wouldn't have left until it was all done. And that would have brought me so much joy. But then the hard piece of it is I see in their eyes what was lost. Mm-hmm. So that I can find really confronting. If there's pity or grief in their eyes, that is so much worse for me than my own pity or grief. But I think the benefits of it in my eyes are worth more than kind of the challenges of it. Whereas people that know me now and meet me now probably don't quite understand the depth that I would have really loved to hook in and to do that.
I really, really appreciate you. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say maybe they do, maybe but I don't think so, because they've never experienced that version of me.
Right. That makes so much sense. And I do really appreciate that you shared the experience of the wedding recently, because I just think like that's such a real example for people to hear. Like this is how it may look sometimes, or like, I don't know. I think that will resonate with people. So thank you for sharing that experience. And in relation to this, and maybe it is like with new people, it sounds like the people who knew you before and who know you now and see kind of what, like, I love that the family members were all like so supportive and helping you maintain your boundaries to keep yourself okay. How did you navigate that with the new relationships with people who don't know what your capacity used to be, and like, or even may or may not know how what your capacity is now, and that doing dishes would be draining for you? How do you know when to tell people if you've had an injury, or how much to tell them? Like any thoughts on this part?
Good question. I think that's always evolving. It's always tricky. And I think sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. But it's all about learning, and what feels right to me might feel right might not feel right to someone else. I'm pretty open about brain injury, to be perfectly honest. Going into a clinical space as a clinician with as a speech and language therapist, that's a space where it's not about me. And so in terms of friendships, it can really vary, and it might vary on my mood as well. So sometimes I'll just try and mask, which I can sustain for a bit, but then it might floor me. And then I'm reminded that, okay, maybe. So it can really fluctuate. But on the whole, I'm pretty open with it. And I find as well, I can quite often tell if I say, I don't know, say if someone invites me for a coffee and I might go, oh, I'd love that. Hey, would it be okay if we choose a cafe that isn't too noisy? I do struggle a bit with noise. And you can often see in their face if they're just like, yeah, of course. Or if they're quite skeptical or judging. And that's okay. I get it. Sometimes people just don't understand. But that's probably maybe not someone I would prioritize putting my energy into, purely because I think so much of brain injury is so invisible. And I'd just rather not have to prove all the time. And there's some spaces where you do need to advocate and where that's a really important skill set. But you do meet people sometimes that just straight away will meet you with open arms, or, I kind of froth for those. Those are the connections I would look for. But I'm pretty open about brain injury. And if people want to ask me more, they're more than welcome. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's, for me, it's part of my journey and it's given me a lot. But in terms of friendships, it does really shape the degree to which I can show up. So it often comes up fairly soon, I would say.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. And that makes sense. Have you found, or I guess, do you have any advice for people in regards to maintaining, like how to advocate for yourself in situations where, a group is doing something or you're with somebody and they want to do something that isn't going to be like good for your symptoms? How do you navigate that? And I'm sure that it depends on the situation and the people. So if there's any general principles of like ideas that people could take to help them navigate that, I would love to have you share those.
Yeah, again, I think it can be really tough. I find where I get tripped up is where I'm being spontaneous, which is, to be honest, really frustrating because I love spontaneity. I like pre-brain injuries, thrived on chaos, love last minute road trips. Like, yes, I don't like things overly planned. To me, it would like kind of suck the joy out of it a little bit. So that's been really interesting, shaping my relationship with that. And the times that I've found I stitch myself up is when I get really excited to feel that sense of spontaneity again. And I go, it'll be fine. Because I think it's a balance of not overthinking about it, but then also considering it in a way that sets you up for success, and it can kind of ebb and flow. And so where I think I can get stuck is where I'm loving connecting with someone, or I just really want to do this thing that I would so enjoy, and I just kind of push everything back and will just mask and then think, oh gosh, I've gone way too far. Or I say yes kind of without the questions that might be relevant. So as an example, which isn't brain injury related, but is related to the back injury. So I had 4 back injuries in 2 years, different to the concussions. So I had trying to lift something really heavy a few times, and what are the other ones? What was the third one? And I was hit by a golf cart, a few different ones. But when I was traveling once, these people said, should we go to a waterfall? It's only 15 minutes away on a scooter. And I said, the scooter's quite bad on my back. I don't know. And I was tossing it up and they said, it's only 15 minutes away. So I was like, you know what? If worse comes to worse, I go to the waterfall and I can get a cab back if my back is bad and I don't have to go with them for the rest of the trip. So I'm always kind of thinking of plan A, B, and C. That's really automatic for me now. So that was my plan B. If I go to the waterfall and it's fine, great. And if it's not, I come back, no harm really done. I'll listen to my body. But I didn't really emphasize or check before we left of, hey, where are we going and what is the plan and what is the time frame? And the plan had been changed to a waterfall 50 minutes away. And that was a completely different story. And that waterfall was really steep to climb down to and really steep to climb up. And it was not fun at all because it was only when I got there that I went, oh no, this has really aggravated things. And I thought, I'm here, I'm going to go to the waterfall. I want to enjoy being with this group. And I walked down, and the more I walked down, the more I could feel my back and my whole left leg just seizing and so sore. And it really kind of threw the travel for maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks till I could settle it enough to sort of do things. But it was a good learning curve for me. I think that's a really good example of where it is something that I would love to do. And so I just kind of say yes. But I think instances like that have taught me to be more comfortable going, hey, what's the earliest that you're arriving? Or what's your expected time frame that will be there? Or understanding what the travel pieces are. The other night I went out to dinner with another friend's family, and they invited me to go with them. And I said, that's so sweet, thank you, but I'll actually take my car and then I'll come for a drink. And then if I need to leave, I can. So it's kind of, I just try to plan ahead and try to ask those questions. And for the right people, I feel like I met in the right way. So for that family, when I arrived at the restaurant, they'd already ordered me a mocktail that was sitting there. They'd ordered me gluten-free starter. You know, they're just super lovely, and I really treasure that. But sometimes you do get people that either they make very obvious comments about, oh, you're being meticulous, or you're overthinking, or you're being dramatic, blah, 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 blah. And again, they don't understand. That's okay. For me, I step back and go, they don't have to understand, but I can still be grounded in my story. And then I'll probably just politely say no. Professional examples are harder because you probably do need someone to really understand. But I think that's the balance for me that I find is I go in with plan A, B, and C, and I think that through, and they kind of come automatically. I have a brain break bag if I need it, but also I gauge people's reactions when I start asking some of those questions. And if I'm not confident enough in the time they're giving, that's all good. But I'm probably not going to go for that, or I'll figure out a way that I can participate where I'm completely autonomous. So if it is too much, I can step back, is how I tend to look at it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I hope that people can, go back and listen to that part again. I think that those, you just brought up so many good strategies and things to be aware of and just checking on. And I think you really beautifully described the pull, like the tug of war in your heart about it. Like, yeah, that's real, I'm sure. And interesting, like, I appreciate you bringing that up, because when I think of this, and like when I hear about people saying yes when I don't even want to say shouldn't, but like when there might be less than pleasant consequences for participating in things. I think sometimes what comes up for people is not as much like, oh, I want to, but it's going to, like, that is definitely a thing. Like, can I handle it? But also, am I going to disappoint the other person by saying no? Which I think is kind of goes on to the people pleasing side of things, and which I think I would struggle with that for sure if I was in that situation. Because we don't want people to be disappointed. We don't want to like let people down or whatever. So I definitely would love to hear you speak to that. But I'll just throw out a couple of thoughts in relation to that first, and would love to hear your thoughts on those as well. But I think, yeah.
On the one about when you're in the moment, just kind of backtracking briefly to that. The other thing I do is I set alarms just with the cute little star emoji. And so I say if I have something at 3 p.m., right? Then I might set a star emoji at 4 p.m. because that takes me out of, I'm loving talking to you, but then the alarm goes off, and that emoji prompts me to reflect where's my body at right now, my capacity, to try and have that pause where I'm then actually, I ignore it quite a lot. But sometimes I do listen to it, and sometimes it is really helpful. And so looking for those ways that you're not necessarily dependent on someone else. I personally don't like it when someone says to me, you need to go and rest. There's a few people that I take it from and I'm really like, thank you so much. But it can frustrate me sometimes. I feel like a toddler being told to go for a nap, even if they're right. So that's kind of a way that I can do that myself without feeling like someone else is telling me what to do.
I like that. I love that, actually, like an external reminder for yourself to check in with yourself and see how you're doing and make decisions from there. Brilliant. Also, I mean, I don't know, it might, if it just has a star like that, maybe that could be like a reminder, like a pause in the conversation, like, oh, here, I need to look at this thing. And then maybe that would be a good excuse to be like, oh, okay. If it is something where you're like, I need to step away, like you can be like, oh, I don't know if you want to use that as a reason to go and do your own thing, but I think that's really smart to have an external reminder to cue you in. So thank you. Love it. Okay. So on the people pleasing side of things, if somebody is dealing, like, we tend to think that we have a lot more control over other people's emotions than we do. So I just want to throw that out there for anybody listening who may be struggling with the people pleasing thing. You're not responsible for anybody else's emotions or their experience. It's okay for people to be disappointed sometimes. In fact, sometimes that just is a demonstration of the love and the care that they have for you, that they wish that you could be with them, but they would probably rather you take care of yourself than not deal with their own disappointment. Like, that's, I think that is, it's important to just remember you're the one who's going to be that needs to stand up for yourself, maintain those boundaries, and protect yourself from potential symptoms if you can, right? And that doesn't mean like we just say whatever to other people's feelings and we don't care, but it is like, just remember where your locus of control is. You can't control other people or what they're thinking or experiencing. And I think there's ways, and I'm sure you've mastered this, ways to pull yourself away or like not do without being offensive. But again, if people choose to be offended, there's nothing you can do about that. But you can do the best that you can, show up the way that, to the degree that you can, that you want to in those kinds of settings. So do you have any thoughts on the people pleasing part of this?
Yeah, I think, look, for the most part, I think I've been really lucky. And I'm really grateful for that, because I have spoken to people in the brain injury community that have really struggled with this aspect, and with people perhaps just not understanding or meeting those needs, and instead meeting it with aggression or frustration or kind of guilt tripping. And I'm really grateful that I haven't had that experience. But there is, look, I'm sure there's lots of those peripheral friendships I spoke about since I've moved to the South Island that might fall in that category where they've invited me to something and I seem really excited to meet them because I am. And then I don't turn up to the thing, even though I've messaged. I'm sure there's lots of people that have thought, oh, okay, well, I won't invite her again. And that is probably a reality. I do focus on the friendships that I've been able to build. So I wouldn't say I hold a lot of grief around that, other than kind of what could have been. But there is one sort of a long, OG core friendship that was a loss, and I didn't realize, I think, and it wasn't something that was brought up until finally I sort of said, hey, I mean, what's been going on for the last couple of years? This is, because I knew if I called it out for a conversation, even lovingly, it might not go particularly well. But this was someone that I really, really valued and still value. And it was really important to me to try and understand, have I done something here, or is there a way that I can support you? And I try to have conversations. Is there a way I could better support you prior to this? But what sort of came out was essentially, and this is only my side of the story, but what was shared was not missing some really important events in their life, and that being taken that I don't care, and that it's sort of a friendship of convenience when it suits me. And that was hard in the sense that, I hate that, because I love being able to contribute to people. But the reality was I haven't been able to contribute how I used to. And whilst from my side, I tried to find different ways of showing up that were accessible, they weren't what was important to that person, which was being there in person for these events and other pieces. And so I guess for me, it was sort of having that grief, but then accepting, well, look, I can only show up as best I can. And I'm really sorry if that's made you feel that way. That cuts me so deep, that due to my brain and back injuries, there's been times where you felt like I really don't care. And that's so true. And so I think that's probably a friendship that conversations weren't had early enough. And unsure if that would really be reconciled or not. But I think part of it for me was also, how much energy do I have right now? And selfishly, where I'm at currently, I really am focusing on people in my community that is reciprocal, and that I light them up and they light me up. And that doesn't take away from the memories that friend and I had, and all the learnings and growth and gratitude that I have for that time and space. But it's not my place to force them to see my way, and I don't think it's their place to see me force me to see their way either. And I would love that they can invest in community where they feel really supported for their needs right now, and also giving myself the same freedom to do so. So yeah, it has looked different how I show up, and it's still something that I do struggle with because I just really like being able to contribute, and I struggle with accepting help, or with accepting help where I feel like it's not, oh, you're doing this for me and I'm doing this for you, or it's not even. So that's been a really big humble pie for me. But I have found other little ways that I show up. I started like making custom watercolor cards for people for special events or things like that. So trying to find ways that are different to how I would have normally done it, but for me to show that I care and I love you. And if that doesn't land with someone, that's actually okay. Like I'd for that friendship and that friend, I want her to be surrounded by people that she feels held by and that she feels valued by. And if how I can show up right now doesn't meet that, that's nothing bad on her and it's nothing bad on me. But we can choose to invest in our own, our own people that do that for us.
I am so grateful that you shared that, like that experience and that the way that you are choosing to view this relationship and like acknowledging the grief, but also giving both of you a lot of grace through it. Like, I just thank you for that example. I really think that will be helpful for people because I'm sure there will be people who can relate to that experience. And it's beautiful to hear that just really loving, kind approach to something that probably does cut really deep. And I'm sure there have been, moments where like it hurts a lot. So I love that you're in a position now that you can look at it and say, okay, this is how I'm choosing to look at that experience. So thank you so much for that.
Flowing on, I think with that friendship, that was relatively recent that's sort of all came up. But I've noticed that it has, I guess, or shaped slightly how I show up in other regards for other people, because I think for me as well, I don't really do birthday parties. Like to be honest, my worst nightmare is inviting even people I love round to have like 30, 40 people in the room. I have to talk to all of them. I have to entertain all of them and they're all looking at me. Like, no, that's just not something. My birthday's New Year's Eve and I love it because everyone's happy. Everyone on the street's happy to see you. Anywhere I am, someone organizes fireworks and someone else organizes an event. And I just turn up. I don't even mention it's my birthday. Sometimes I get a birthday cake. Sometimes I don't. But it's a great day and I love it. Awesome. So I think it was also kind of something for me to sit back and reflect, because certain people love to throw parties for any kind of win in their life. And I think I'd underestimated like the value of that for this friendship, for me turning up, I think was different to what I would value that as, because that's not even something that I don't think I've ever, I had a party when I was like 5 years old. Other than that, I've literally never had an event. If I ever get married, we'll see how I do that. But it has sort of shaped. So as an example, a very good friend of mine from when we were like 11 years old has moved down to the city I live in, which is so cool. And it was her daughter's first birthday party the same week of my graduation. So I looked at that and I went, oh man, these are two really important events, 2 days apart with a lot of energy. And so from the experience of the friendship that sort of fractured, I messaged ahead of time to this high school friend of mine. And I said, look, I'd love to be there. And if I can be there, I will be. But I'd also be interested, what does your calendar look like in the next month or so? I'd love to pencil in like a graduation picnic or something we could do that's sort of low stimulus, but to really celebrate you and your husband and your little baby for getting to a first year of parenthood. And so that's something that I've taken to reflect on, is I wasn't showing up how that friend needed me to. So for the relationships that are there and that I treasure and invest in, how can I just make sure, or I don't know, I'm not responsible for anyone else's feelings, but if that is something that's important to them and I might not be able to be there, is there another way that I could communicate, or, doing a different event that's just us? And in that instance, I did get to go to the first birthday party and it was amazing. But if I couldn't, and if I had to pull out the day before, already I know that they know they're valued. And so I think it's sort of just helped shape how I try to, because it sucks always pulling out of things and I don't like it. And I'm really grateful for everyone that stuck by with me for that. But also they don't have to. And so it's trying to find ways that I can balance it.
That's such a beautiful example. And yes, I love that you found the lesson from that experience and are applying it to the current the relationships that you are able to and interested in putting the energy and effort into. So I think that's so beautiful. And something that you mentioned that she had said to you, that just I don't know, it struck a chord. And so I just want to bring it out, that she said that, it sounded like, I'm guessing there was some kind of accusation of, this is just a relationship of convenience. You'll only do it if it's okay, if it works for you. And that I can see that as being said with a lot of judgment, or it could come across as a very oh, I can't believe you would be like that. It's just if it's convenient for you. But the things that cut the deepest are often because there's some level of we wonder if there's true to some degree. And on a bigger level, well, yeah, it's not that it's convenient or not. It's can I do it or not? Right? Do I have the capacity to do this or not? And for your friend, he or she probably didn't understand that. And so I love that you're learning from this lesson and, trying to make sure that in your future relationships, you're let me make sure that that this is important to me and that the reason I'm not there is because of these other things. But I think it's also okay to do things, to have a relationship of convenience, because that is the quote unquote convenience, capacity, that is kind of the way you need to do it. And that's okay. So give yourself permission to do that. So I just wanted to call that out. I think it is important.
Thank you. And I think as well on that, because what I did notice soon after that happened is friends that have, been long haul friends, I'd be like, I'm so sorry. I hope you know that I really care about you. Almost overcompensating. And one of them I love, she's so ruthless. She was like, I literally don't care. What is all of this? And so she's great. If I ever want an honest opinion, she is who I will go to. But it was good because I sat back and I was like, that's from my fear of losing your friendship, for you taking that I genuinely can't, is that I don't care. But I think as well, there is an element of surrender. Everyone has their own lived experience, their own traumas, their own journeys. And I think it is sort of an unhealthy space if I'm coming to relationships that I am trying to invest in with that, oh my God, please don't leave me kind of energy. So it was fairly fleeting. And that comment made me think, yeah, what am I doing? I mean, and also having awareness, because I have so many people in my life that I do genuinely care about. I don't have the capacity to message everyone every day. And I think everyone else is the same. So where I fall, I think, into some traps with people, or maybe where it misaligns, is I might not see you for 10 years. This happened actually recently. I bumped into someone from high school that I literally hadn't seen for 10 years. And he was like, oh my gosh, how are you? I said, we should catch up. Amazing. We caught up for a coffee. Lovely. Love it. Exchanged things. Haven't seen him since. Might be another 10 years, but you're still a friend to me. And that's how I personally operate. I'm not very good at keeping in touch along the way, but when I see you in person, you have my full focus. But I think for other people, friendship is every day keeping in touch. And there's maybe 3 friends that I, a few days a week, keep in touch with consistently. But it doesn't mean I don't love the others any less. I just couldn't sustain that. And so it's just, I think, as well, expectations. And mine isn't right. Someone else's isn't wrong. It just, I think, different flavors for different people.
Yes. Amen. That very well said. Beautiful. Okay. Well, we should probably be wrapping this up here, although I could easily just talk to you all day. This is so fun to talk to you. You gave some really great advice for people who are, trying to manage friendships after recovery, or after brain injury. If you have any other thoughts for them, I welcome those. But also, what advice do you have for the friends, the people who are wanting to love and support from a friend position, someone who is dealing with a brain injury?
Nice. So I think I'll start with people with brain injury. Something that I look at and still is, again, for me, I think friendships, genuine true friendships, kind of evolve from high touch points, and that can be quite hard to achieve in a brain injury context. But thinking, is there a group or a volunteering role or something that's accessible for me where maybe I could meet people, and you might not make a friend immediately, but over time you form sort of friendships. So for me, I volunteer at the hospital when I have capacity. They're great. If I have a month where I'm a bit more spacious, they let me come in again, and then I pop out again for 6 months and come in again for a month. They're really good to work with me on that front. But I have some lovely friendships in that space that are really wholesome, and people I never would have met before because we cross each other in the hallway. And but that's also an environment that's more accessible for me. It's planned, and again, I can say I can come when I have capacity. So I think that's what if friendship is something the one's struggling with, which I think is so valid, are there spaces that could just offer kind of that interaction with people week on week or more frequently? But I also think we have a lot of gift in ourselves. So I have grown to love myself so much more over this brain injury journey because I'm with me way more than I used to be. And that's kind of cool. You know, I love going on solo dates and exploring things, and my mind never stops. I'm always chattering away and observing different things or asking different things. So, you know, that's always accessible. Even if I have a week where socializing with someone else isn't, I can still go and walk around the park and people watch and look at all the flowers and trees. So I think just brainstorming things that fill your cup that's accessible and kind of not rushing it. And I think for people that have people in their community that have brain injury, I think the first thing that came to mind for me was if you don't understand, you don't necessarily need to try, in the sense of just taking it as I hear you. So if someone says, I'm really having a struggling brain day today, could we sit outside instead of in the cafe because it's noisy? So rather than going, oh, why? It's not even that noisy, or, oh, can't you just do 15 minutes? Or trying to get the person to explain it, instead going, okay, let's kind of work together, or sure, we can sit outside. Because I think the way I look at it is no one really loves being the person going, oh, I can't do this, or can the whole group change their plans for just me? I mean, I hate doing that. So I think respecting that if they're flagging those things, it's probably important, and having that understanding that so much of brain injury is invisible, and where you can try to meet it with compassion, or it might be that maybe that social event isn't possible for that person. But maybe as the friend you offer, well, hey, look, well, what does next week look like for you? Let's try and do a catch up then. So trying to sort of meet them where they're at. And that goes for brain injury and so many other things. I think I still do have prejudice for people that have invisible injuries, but it's come a long way, I think, where if someone says to me, oh, my gut's really bad today, but they look fine, I'm much more better able to go, oh, is there any way we can support? Like, are you comfortable here? Would you like to lie down? If you need to finish up, let me know. Whereas I think pre-brain injury, I'd be going, you seem okay. I mean, you're not pale, or you're sitting up, you know? And so I think that's just being with someone with what they share and trusting that they're probably sharing it for a reason, and you don't necessarily have to understand it to offer that space and to hold them in that space.
So good. So beautiful. And that actually just reminded me my 6-year-old daughter who keeps telling me that her stomach hurts. And I'm like, yeah, but you're okay. Go play the soccer game. And then she's fine. I'm like, okay, see, look, it was fine. It's hard to figure these things out. But maybe the parent-child relationship might be a little bit different. I don't know. Maybe not.
I think. And also there's always going to be moments we're human at the end of the day. And we can also be very self-absorbed. Me as well. I was having a conversation with someone the other day via Zoom, and they mentioned they have a vision impairment. And in my head, I was like, oh, yeah, because they looked fine to me. And I was kind of like, oh, yep, and sort of moved on. But then as we went through, she shared more of what her day actually looks like. And I thought, oh, shivers. I mean, that's quite a challenge. But when I got off the call, I reflected. I was like, kind of made a judgment call there, mate. Rather than accepting what she was saying. And it's good to reflect, I think, on that, because that was totally an instance where I was thinking, well, you seem to be doing this all good, so that's fine. That's because she had supports. Inability doesn't mean, or sort of disability doesn't mean complete inability. But you can achieve great things with supports there. And I think there's a bit of a prejudice that if you have any ability, how can one be disabled, or how can one be injured? But they can coexist.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point, and so well said. And I do think that it would probably shock us if we could see what people's days were like. Like you said, what it takes, what it requires for people to just do the things that they're doing or the other things that they're dealing with as they're doing it. Just there's a lot of good reason to just have compassion for everyone out there. Like trust that people are doing their best and believe them when they say what they're dealing with. So I appreciate that perspective. This was such a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you so much for everything that you shared. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure we get out there before we jump off here?
Yeah, thank you so much, A, for having me. And B, I did have a thought that came to mind, which was around new friends, old friends, and I mean kind of pre and post brain injury. One thing I observe, which I'm trying to sort of stretch on, is I'm quite comfortable staying with people that knew me pre-brain injury, but I'm quite hesitant staying with people post-brain injury. There's a few that I do because I can't mask it for multiple days on end. So they'll see what it can take for me to show up fully, and that brings an element of vulnerability. And so for me, that's something that I'm working on just saying without necessarily feeling any guilt or shame around that, just as what it is, and I can still show up, and these are just some things that help do that. But yeah, I kind of acknowledge for me that feels a lot more vulnerable with people that didn't know me before, seeing me as in this way, shape or form. First, people that knew me beforehand, I know that they knew what I was like before, so I'm kind of more comfortable. Yeah.
That's super
interesting.
Yeah, so interesting. But also I feel like that vulnerability, Brene Brown has a book, The Power of Vulnerability. Like that really is what makes connections and like deepens. You want to get a good friend, like find someone that you're going to be vulnerable with, and you're going to like, it does connect people in a really significant way. So that's a good point to make.
Sorry, I know you're finishing up, but I think on that as well, what I have learned is often people see it anyway. So for example, I have this lovely neighbor, and when I was struggling with the brain and keeping up with what I was doing, I was sort of going downhill a little bit, just capacity wise. Suddenly I noticed once a week she'd drop dinner on my doorstep, and then when I kind of had more capacity, dinner stopped coming on my doorstep. And it was like, I never told you how much I was struggling. So I think as well, I like to think that I can, look hunky-dory, but clearly people can see and tell when you are really fatigued. And I think there's vulnerability in that, but there's also beauty in that, right? So it's not something to kind of be shameful or hide about. Some people do see that as a strength. And so for me, it's reframing that and kind of being more open to letting people in, the right people, but being open to showing up because it's authentically me where I'm at now, and I kind of like me. And so it makes sense to lean into that a little bit more, and other people might be able to relate to that same vulnerability that can come with that.
That's so beautiful. We're all so human doing this human thing, figuring it out together. And I love that, like, bless your friend who noticed and just served you in that way. I really love that. What a good example. So thank you. You are so amazing. And I really love this perspective. I hope this will be really helpful for people out there who are wondering about the friendships thing and how to navigate it. I think you gave some beautiful examples and wonderful, you're setting a wonderful example on how to do this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for all the work you do in this space. I mean, speaking of cognitive load, reaching out to people, arranging time, setting up links, doing blurbs, editing podcasts, it's a lot. And I just see that and I value that. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.